Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to be going over a game that Shusaku played when he was still very young, around 10 years old, and he was already rated 3 Dan when he played this game. So he was obviously a child prodigy, very good from a very young age. And there's two things that I want to focus on this game review. The first is a little bit of a higher level technique, but I want to talk about frustrating your opponent's intention. And the other thing that I want to focus on is Sente and Gote, because basically, after your opponent plays a move, you should always ask yourself, is that move Sente? Do I have to respond to that? Because if the answer is no, then that move was Gote, and you have Sente, you have the initiative, and you can play anywhere on the board that you want. And if you just kind of internalize that little check of asking after every move, do I have to respond to that? Do I have to respond to that? How much do I lose if I don't? A lot of times, particularly in the double-digit Qs and the high single digits even to a certain degree, you'll see players defending 2 or 3 unimportant stones even in the opening, and if your opponent actually goes ahead and plays another move to capture those stones, 3 stones is only 6 points at the end of the game. And there's usually bigger moves on the board than 6-point moves until we get to the end game. And once you're in endgame, you have to make those evaluations yourself. But generally speaking, we want to look at every move to see if we can take Sente. And there's some good examples of that in this game. So this isn't really common anymore, this enclosing the corner right away, but basically this is still totally playable because there's 2 corners left, so black is basically treating the 2 corners as Miai and saying, I definitely want an enclosure in this game. And now we're going to get into the idea of frustrating your opponent's intention. So black has said, okay, I definitely want this enclosure, and this enclosure is projecting down this side. Typically, if white just plays a move, on, what we can think of as his side, the left side, to coordinate with this stone, then black gets to take the corner facing the enclosure. So white does something interesting here and plays on the 5-3 point. And basically this is just saying, oh, you wanted to do something over here with this enclosure facing down the side? I'm just going to play a move that doesn't let you do that. And, I would not call this necessarily an optimal move, but in terms of not allowing your opponent to do what they want to do, which can be a valid strategic choice, is say, oh, you want a lot of influence, I'm going to take a slightly less favorable result to deny you that, so that your plan isn't working. So now Shusaku, who's playing black, goes ahead and does basically the same thing on the other side and says, oh, look, this stone is, open from this direction, you're probably going to want to enclose here. I'm going to play something that, keeps this small for you over here. So the game proceeds, and this is all fairly basic. This move kind of seems small maybe, but this turn into the corner is big and guarantees black a base. And it's kind of, so this is basically black is looking to settle quickly in this corner using this Joseki. Black comes into the lower side. And here we kind of see, this jump is typical. It pressures the stone. It keeps black in the corner, not too big. But it doesn't really coordinate super well here. But we are basically building some influence facing the black Shamari, so that was the plan with this move. So basically black's taking the territory, and white gets to extend from the wall out to, in the face of the enclosure. And this is always big. We really look at extensions towards or from our own enclosure as being particularly large. And in this case, because this white formation is thick on the outside, white actually can go a space further than we would typically see from this 2-stone wall. Typically the rule of thumb is that we would extend 3 points. But there's another key element about the spacing here, and that's that if, for some chance, black comes in somewhere over here to cut off the stone, there's still room for a two-space extension. So this stone can kind of establish itself on the side. And a lot of times we'll kind of see this when we're trying to decide where to extend. Because basically with these stones helping us, it seems like this is a little too narrow. We would like to go for more. But if we go two spaces further, now this is getting dicey because this counterattack is more severe. We only have room for a one-space jump, and there's basically no way to establish a base on the side. Now, the same can be said of this stone, but it's something to think about when we're extending. We don't want to leave an obvious weakness behind. And this kind of goes back to frustrating your opponent's intention. Sometimes I've seen in pro commentary, or even, very advanced Dan commentary, when evaluating two different options, they'll reject one because it makes the continuation too simple for the opponent. So for example, in this case, we've created a giant and very easy to see invasion point. So this is making it easy for our opponent to find a good move. When we hold back one more line, like in the game, well, you would think, well, this is one space further, maybe I can invade, maybe I want to do this extension, but just a 2-point extension from my own enclosure is rather small. So we're not giving black an obvious counter move over here. And that's something to think about. It's definitely a higher level technique, but ideally you want to choose a continuation or a variation that's not easy on your opponent. And, this is why a lot of times you won't see in a high-level game just a simple 3-3 invasion. Everyone knows the Joseki, and it's really easy for black to just, or if you're white and you invade, for your opponent to just get a big wall, And sometimes there's variations where they can choose to take Sente. It leaves your opponent in the driver's seat. Whereas, something like an attachment off a 4-4 stone when you're trying to invade leaves you more room to maneuver in a lot of senses. So once black turns here, this stone is kind of weak. This pincer here would be big now. So white establishes a position on the side. Black comes under here, and white decides to defend. And then black applies some pressure. And you can see how these two moves, the ones here and here, coordinate to put pressure on this group. So ideally, black is trying to get this extension in Sente. So this is a good point. Of these two moves that were played over here, white did not respond to the first one in the corner. And so this is what I was talking about earlier, is asking yourself if a move is Sente. And specifically I mean in the local situation, because we can see globally white does respond to this by making an extension on the left. But white can make that extension on the left because this move is only really threatening to take one stone. And yes, it's a big stone, it's in the corner, and it would be a big territorial point in the endgame. But it doesn't affect the life and death of this group. It doesn't keep this group from moving to the outside. It just takes one stone on the inside. So one thing to note is that if black were to go ahead and take this stone, that these two black moves, the one at B18 and the one at D18, are on the inside of the formation. And yes, they're taking territory, and yes, we need territory to win, but they're not going to impact the flow of the game, because they're on the inside. These white stones and these black stones, these will continue to impact what happens on the board. But these two stones really have not much scope to influence things in the future. So this is really small at this point in the game. When we get into endgame, this one stone capture would be a rather large move, especially if white has to end up coming back like this. But it's likely to be Gote no matter what. So, because if we don't respond to this white move, why did we play this Atari in the first place? Ignoring it now and letting white capture is worse than not having played that move in the first place, so we kind of have to follow through with our intentions in Go. It's not good to play a move and then change your mind, unless you realize you've made a mistake or a blunder, in which case, yes, reverse course if you have to. But typically, if you play a territorial move like this, it's kind of silly to now come back out into the center with this group, because we've just made this white group really strong. So white's not gonna be worried about this. in the same way is if we come out like this, now white thinks, oh, maybe there's something in here. Maybe now white responds to this move instead, so we get this move in Sente instead of the push at e2 in Sente. So moving forward, so now once black plays this, we notice that this move was Gote, and that allowed us to play somewhere else. Now what about this move? Is this move Sente? And, you know, it's not absolute per se. It's likely that white could indeed Tanuki to play another large point. But the problem is that this group is going to struggle quite a bit now. And in this position too, I want to point out if white tries to come through the elephant's eye, or the elephant's jump, sometimes called, this two-space diagonal jump, the point for black is now here, and this is really painful for white. If white wants to stay connected, which is probably the better of the options, black comes here, and now white has to struggle to come out with no eyes at all, which is really hard. From here, I don't know, black might come like this, because even if white takes this stone, it's only one eye. But the problem here is really going to be that this group is not terribly strong. And this group is going to be running, so black is going to get a bunch of moves on the outside, and then can turn and attack this group. It's never good to have two. Well, this group is not that weak, but it's not that strong either. And having two attackable groups, I should say, is that this isn't weak, but it's attackable. Next to each other is never a good thing. You're likely to lose one of your strings of stones. So instead of ignoring this, but the thing is that, like I said, you know, there's lots of different things that could happen here, but white goes ahead and ignores it again to play this two-space jump. Now black goes into action, saying, okay, well, you ignored me twice. You can't ignore me a third time. And white says, yes, I need to maintain the connection of my stones. And then black goes back to protect the corner against this two-step extension here. White comes out, which starts to build this area, and immediately black comes in and says, oh, you want to build an area. I should reduce immediately. And, you know, this is... I don't know too much about this player, but I'm assuming that there was kind of a somewhat of a local rivalry, or maybe that's just the style that these two players play in, is that as soon as they sense their opponent wants something, they immediately try to stop it. So white plays one move to start building up a framework, and black says, I'm reducing right away. So, just kind of interesting there. White strengthens a little bit, plays a couple forcing moves, and then jumps out. The idea here is that instead of playing a move to attack the stone directly, the idea is that maybe if we get a bunch of moves over here, and then maybe we do something in the center, maybe we just naturally swallow it. And this is also referred to as capturing something on a large scale. If white plays just to capture one black stone, but then black gets some stones here and some stones here, and then this potential is gone, yes, white has captured a stone and made a little bit of territory, but you really want to think as big as possible, especially when the board is this open and we're in the opening. So white plays to kind of mess with the connection up here. Black plays one move to jump out and push, and now that black is getting these moves, white finally decides that, oh, okay, I can't get sealed in with this group. It's not alive yet. I need to maintain my connection to the outside, and plays a move to defend it. But that lets black kind of try to link up all of these stones here. White plays and then cuts and extends, and then this is important, is why does white extend? And also, of these two cutting points, why does white take this one? One reason is that this stone might need reinforcement, or it might get captured, more so than these other two stones. The other thing is that white's really going for everything. So for example, if white extends now, we're looking at maybe we can catch these three stones, but black can also, just in a simple way, play something like this and force white to capture the 3 stones. And now, black is getting stones that influence the active area of the board. And this is big, don't get me wrong, but 3 stones is just 3 stones. So another thing is, after we cut, the very first thing that we need to think about, even before we cut, is, can this stone be captured? And can it be captured in a ladder, or can it be captured in a net? And in this case, the answer is probably both. I wouldn't be surprised if white plays away. Where is this ladder going? Let's see. Pass right through the star point. So here's an easy way to visualize ladders, is that, let's say white plays away somewhere, separates these stones here. Black plays here, white plays here. If one of your stones, look at where you are in reference to the star point. So in this case, our lower ladder stone, this being kind of what I'll refer to as the upper ladder stone, our lower ladder stone is going to be played on the star point, which means we don't have to read this ladder out all the way. We just go down to here, which is right on the diagonal that the star point is on, and we know this because we're going off of where we played our stone. We're eventually going to play a black stone down here. Let me just play this. Eventually we're going to play a black stone here. And when we play that stone, it's going to force white to extend to the left. So white's going to play here. Now we already know that we have a stone up here because that's the stone that forced white to come down. Black plays here, white plays here, which puts our stone in Atari, but that's the last liberty and black can capture in the ladder right here. So we can tell that the ladder works for black, so white needs another move. And ladders are a great place to start practicing your reading because they're unbranched. And being able to visualize a ladder across the board quickly allows you to read so much faster than if you have to really think about, okay, how is this going to go? But it's unbranched. There's only one possible move the whole ladder sequence. So it's a great place to start practicing your reading because reading is just so crucial to getting stronger. When white comes out this way, it's threatening these 5 stones. So remember the other way we were threatening 3 stones? Now we're threatening 5, which here black has to ask, is this sente? If I ignore this, how am I going to do with these 5 stones? And they're kind of heavy and they have no eye shape, and it's going to be tricky to come here with the 2 white stones acting as reinforcements for the fighting through here. So black says, alright, I'll connect. That extension is sente. Now, white comes out, and here we're at a very interesting point in the game, because black has more territory. It should be pretty obvious that black has 4 corners, and white has none. So, white really needs a big area in the center. And with this move, white's kind of saying, I'm going to capture these 5 stones. And if white doesn't, then there's not really any way to make up the territorial difference, because it's not like white has sealed an area off. White has influence, but not really a territorial framework, so attacking is probably the logical way to go here. And you'll notice that, the center is open from this group, it's open from this group, and if this group survives, it doesn't seem like a promising game for white. So black does the obvious thing, which is to jump out from the group, and here white makes what is probably the game-losing move. It's really hard to pinpoint an exact move this early in the game that will you're like, oh, well, when white played this, it's kind of over. But it really gives you an idea of how good Shusaku was at evaluating positions, even at a very young age, because white plays this peep. And right now, we need to ask ourselves, is this sente? Because if it is, and we have to connect, then we're going to come under a very vicious attack. But the key element is that black's group lives. It's not so vital that specifically the A stone survive. So Shusaku looks at this position and says, that peep is not sente. I don't care about the one stone. I care about keeping a group alive here. So, check it out. Shusaku connects here, and white plays another peep here, which is threatening this push and cut right here. And Shusaku again says, is this sente? And the conclusion that he reaches is no, because this move allows black to counterattack. So instead of responding by connecting, black pushes here. And this is a very, this, 4-move sequence where white peeps twice and black ignores both times is just, to me, it's a really awesome sequence because it demonstrates some really important concepts in Go. One is, like I was saying, frustrating your opponent's intention. White says, you need to save all these stones. And black just says, no, I don't. I just need to save some of the stones. And the players proceed to have a conversation about that. But the key element where black ignores 2 peeps in a row to pursue his own path is really key because black is not answering out of habit or following his opponent around the board. He's evaluating the position and asking at every single move, is that sente? Are you sure that that's sente? And 2 moves in a row, white plays moves that aren't. So this is kind of a definitive turning point. Because if we go back just a little bit here, when black jumps out here, white has to attack this group. This is the way for white in this game. There's not an option to not attack this group if you have any hope of winning. But then white plays 2 gote moves in a row that allow black to sidestep the attack in a very interesting way. So let's keep moving forward here, because now black cuts here. And this is definitely putting an eye on the weaknesses of these 3 stones plus this stone. So if you think about it, in this position, white gets these 2 peeps, but black gets to counterattack. So definitely black gets the better of the exchange. When black extends here, it's threatening to net this group. And that's, again, this is something that this should be your first instinct. Let's just even go back to this. When white extends here, and you should have, hopefully you read that white would try to extend here, or at least considered the possibility when you decided to push and cut. The first question is, can white capture this stone in a ladder? And so here, we note that this stone is 1 step below the start point. So as we come down, white's going to play here, which forces black to go there. White plays there, and we can see this runs into these 2 white stones. So this ladder is working for black. So black kind of has to extend, or do something, one way or another, or play a diagonal move, or you could potentially do some sort of jump, depending on the position that broke the ladder, but generally speaking, with a cutting stone in particular, you're going to want to extend. And now we need to ask ourselves the same question for these 3 white stones. Obviously there's not an immediate ladder because they have 3 liberties, but is this net working? Because if this net is working, then white's position is collapsing if they ignore this move. And as it turns out, there is no way for white to break out of this net. There's too many external liberties with this group. If there were one less, if there were a white stone at B, and black tried this net, then white could play here, and then this would be Atari, and then white could Atari out of the net. But with the extra liberty down here, with the 2 on the outside, then this net is working. So white has to jump out. Now black comes back, and now it's looking like black is maybe going to be able to swallow these stones. And the other cool thing about this move is that it's totally preventing this cut from working. So white played 2 peeps, one of which we're kind of discounting because it only threatens to cut off the B stone, and then the other at C is not working either right now because these 2 stones are short of liberties. So Shusaku has played a really neat sequence to sidestep white's attack in this position. Now once white comes out here, black comes back, and again we have a very interesting question. Can we capture this in a ladder? The answer is no in this case. We'd be coming down like this, and we run back into the white stones again. But can we capture it in a net? And to this, the answer is yes, again, because this black group at B has the extra liberty at C. So this net is working, and that should always just be, the first questions you ask yourself. Can I capture it in a ladder? Can I capture it in a net? If the answer is yes, then we know that that variation is working or not working for us, depending on if it's us capturing our opponent's stone or our opponent capturing our theoretical play. So white has to come out, which kind of, definitely threatens to capture these two. And now black comes back to connect against that original peep. But now the situation has changed, because black has several stones over here now, and these two stones are very weak. If black had answered this immediately, black would have just become heavy. But with these stones here, it seems like black might end up swallowing these stones. So, at this point, white realizes this group is in danger. I need to do something about it, because black is strong here from connecting, but unlike before, has a thick connected shape back out to the outside. So if this comes to a capturing race between these stones and these stones, black stones will be able to get more liberties by playing on the outside. So white needs a base, quickly. And here, black plays very well in doing the hane on the outside, which allows white to connect and make a little bit more solid eye shape, but takes a really large corner for black. Now white could still, connect underneath here to reduce this, but this is not as friendly for the eye shape. Now, this is another great sequence because white peeps again, and for the third time, black says, "Nah, that's not important," because what is this move actually threatening to do? Like, if white does follow up at A, the only thing that happens is the B stone is cut off. Black says, it's just one stone. I really like this game just because black has this really light style in this fight, where it's just like, that's just one stone, my friend. Why don't we go over here and threaten to capture something that's a little bit more important? White says, oh, well, I don't want black to get an eye here. And obviously, this connection isn't working. Black can play again and swallow up the stones. And now black resists this peep by playing on the outside. White exchanges a forcing move, comes back here threatening to connect to these stones on the inside. But now black wraps around this peeping stone. And just this series of A, B, and C, these three peeps that get like serially ignored, just like black is like, you can peep anywhere you want, I'm not going to answer you. Just really a neat example of sort of this, dodging the attack and then coming back later to swallow the stone. I think it's really cool. Really neat sequence in the game. And see, now black has to come back, but notice these three stones now, they're heavy and they're weak. These stones, just white is getting so many weaknesses out here. Because basically, if black comes out with these two stones, then white has 1, 2, 3 weak groups on this side alone, and these might be connected out, or they might not, but, these aren't in too good of shape either. So, we started with a situation where black had the weak group and white was attacking, but now black has so many choices for counterattacking that it seems rather untenable for white to think of killing these stones anymore. But white's got to try, because, like I said, there's not really any other hope of winning this. So see, this is really crucial timing. White has to spend a move to come back and eliminate these weaknesses now. And also, black has got one definite eye, and this is going to be an eye in Sente, because if white ignores this capture and black plays here, then it's just 2 eyes and it's alive. So now white could connect here to make this one large eye, but one thing to think about is that even if white does that, this is a lot of internal liberties. So if this comes down to a capturing race with another group, this 5-point eye is going to be worth a lot of liberties to black. White comes back to connect, and at this point, white has just accepted that this group is living and is going to try and stake out some points in other parts of the board. This descent is really large, but now black is counterattacking. The idea now is that this move is kind of small because there's too many ways for black to fight on the outside, with this opening here and this opening here, that playing this move is likely to not work, and you're just giving your opponent more points by playing inside their territory. So this proceeds for a little bit. White gets pushed down really hard on the right-hand side, and you can tell just from the move before this, white's really not getting anything down here because it's open on both sides. If it's only open on one side, you could theoretically spend a move at some point to close it off and make it territory. But here, it's just like, well, white has to play 2 moves. That's a little frustrating. Yeah, this monkey jump is rather large. And then this is an interesting technique that not a lot of people know to handle the monkey jump. The idea being that, let's go to the move tool, if white Ataris this right now, black will come over here, white will capture, and then black will connect, probably here just to make sure that there's no eye shape. And white can't live back here. So these stones are just captured. So that playing that Atari doesn't work. So instead, white has to fall back to here. That comes here, white connects, and then black has to connect in the corner to keep white from playing the Atari now at S2. And notice this move is a little bit of a dual purpose, because if white does come here, now there's no follow-up cut here. Whereas if black played something else, there may be Aji later when the liberties are getting reduced. So it's an interesting bit of trivia there. And basically, at this point, white resigns, because there's no attack on the black group, and white doesn't have territory to compete with the 4 black corners. So I hope you enjoyed that, looking a little bit at the sequence in the center where black ignored white peeps at A, B, and C, and shifted the focus of play away from them until he was able to attack and in some cases actually capture them. So I hope you enjoyed that. We're going to be doing more Shusaku games coming up in the future here, and also doing pro reviews when I find things that are interesting or novel in pro games. There's always new patterns coming up, but I really like some of these historic games, and especially some of these from when Shusaku was young, because, you know, he wasn't, these aren't games between masters yet. Later on in my Shusaku Kifu collection, it's all really advanced players, but, you know, when we're learning how to play, sometimes it's easier to learn from players who are closer to our level. And you know, obviously Shusaku's a genius because he was, like I said, I think he was 10 when this game was played, and it's obviously a solid game between 2 good players, but it's not quite as insane as sometimes you'll be watching a game between Lee Sedol and, you know, some, you know, other Korean player, and it's just fighting all over the board, and it's really hard to follow what's going on. But these games are straightforward enough that, you know, we can understand these even at the Q level. We can start, you know, asking questions about moves like, is that Sente? Is that Gote? How many points is that actually worth? Is that stone actually important? And, you know, because, for example, one thing to point out here, and like when we're talking about important stones, is, okay, these 4 black stones are a great reducing maneuver. Okay, they happened in Sente. White had to respond to stay connected. But now let's say white plays here, threatening to capture the 4. Well, part of the reason these were Sente is that these stones would die if they, you know, get cut off from the side here. But now, well, now they're already connected. If we play here, we save our 4 stones. If white plays here, captures 4 stones and makes a point of territory. So it's a 9-point Gote move. Maybe there's something bigger than 9 points. And one thing that you should start to ask yourself is like, well, how big is this capture? What's the difference in points and territory if I make this capture versus if white connects over here? Because if this is 10 points and this is 9 points, and like we said earlier, this is Gote, and this is Gote, well, 1 point's not a lot, but if you can make those, if you can analyze that and you're consistently making 1 or 2 point better endgame moves, sometimes you could be behind by 10, 15 points on the board, but if you can consistently identify the biggest endgame move and your opponent is not as good at that, you could come back and win that game. And that's one of the things that's cool about, practicing these different aspects of the game, is that if your endgame is good, you can keep playing a game when you're slightly behind, thinking, well, I am really good at counting an endgame, so that's a skill that I have. That's something I'm going to use to win games. And I've certainly come back from, I've lost groups through a blunder at the beginning of the game, and then just focused down, came within, shooting distance of my opponent, and then won an endgame because I was able to correctly identify the biggest moves. And endgame is also a really good time to practice your Sente Gote, because the difference in a lot of the size of an endgame move revolves a lot around whether it's Sente for you and whether it's Gote for you. Because Sente moves are basically profit for free, so you always want to identify those and play them when you get the chance. So thank you for watching, and like I said, we'll have a few more of these videos and game reviews coming up in the not too distant future.